We tell stories of human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFI without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name is Amir Sohal. Let's begin. The sun had barely risen over the alien city of Veyloria, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Towers of crystal and metal reached into the clouds, reflecting the morning light in a dazzling display. In the midst of this grandeur, the palace of the alien Heir Tharion stood tallest of all. Its walls gleamed like liquid silver, and the gardens surrounding were perfect in every way. Flowers of colors unseen by human eyes bloomed endlessly, their petals glimmering with a faint, magical glow. Tharion strode through the garden, his long robes trailing behind him. His face was a mask of arrogance, his green eyes scanning the gardeners and servants with thinly veiled contempt. Today, like every day, he had woken with a sense of power, the kind that only the heir of Veyloria could feel. A small figure worked quietly among the flowers. He was plain, almost invisible against the brilliance of the palace gardens. His clothes were simple, worn, and covered in the dust of the earth. His hands moved with care and precision, trimming the plants, watering the soil, and whispering soft words that seemed to make the flowers bloom brighter. Tharion laughed, a cold, cutting sound that echoed across the marble pathways. He stopped a few steps away from the gardener, a cruel smile curling his lips. "Look at him," Tharion said to himself, "the great gardener who thinks he can touch perfection. Pathetic." The gardener did not look up. His eyes remained calm, his expression unreadable. But if anyone could read the subtle flicker in those dark eyes, they would see a spark. Something dangerous, something powerful, something that no one should dare to challenge. Tharion bent down to pluck a single flower. He held it up and sniffed it exaggeratedly, then tossed it to the ground. "Even the flowers are weak in your care," he sneered. "Why do you waste your life here?" The gardener finally lifted his head. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. There was no fear in his gaze, only quiet strength. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he simply continued his work, as if the heir's words were meaningless. Tharion's laughter grew louder. "Do you hear me? I am speaking to you." Finally, the gardener spoke, his voice calm, low, and steady. "I hear you, young heir, but perhaps it is you who does not see." Tharion's eyes narrowed. "Do not speak to me like that, fool. You are nothing." The gardener's fingers paused over a delicate flower. "Nothing, perhaps, or perhaps everything. Power is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, and the world trembles when it awakens." A sudden gust of wind swept through the garden, bending the trees slightly and stirring the petals. Tharion frowned. The gardeners and palace guards looked around nervously, but no one saw anything unusual. Only the gardener stood perfectly still, his calm expression unchanged. Tharion turned away, brushing off the unease that had briefly touched him. "Enough. Your words are meaningless. I have no time for fools today." But the gardener whispered under his breath, "The time will come when you understand." Far across the city, in a narrow, dimly lit chamber far below the towers, a desperate voice trembled over a crystal communicator. Commander Aaron, a human envoy to Veyloria, was speaking frantically. Sweat rolled down his forehead, and his hands shook as he held the device. "Captain, you must listen. They are planning something catastrophic. If Tharion succeeds, all colonies could be destroyed." The voice on the other end was calm, but firm. "Commander, you must stay calm. Tell me everything from the beginning." Aaron took a deep breath and began recounting everything he had learned. "We intercepted transmissions. The alien heir has gained access to the Godslayer weapon. They say it is impossible, but I've seen the proof. The weapon can erase entire planets with a single strike. And now, it is aimed at human colonies." The calm voice replied. "And the gardener?" Aaron hesitated. "What gardener?" There was a pause. "The one in the palace gardens. The one Tharion mocks every day. He is not what he seems. You must find him. He is the only one who can stop this." Aaron's hands tightened around the communicator. "Stop him? How? He's just a gardener." "Appearances are deceiving, Commander. Trust me." Before Aaron could ask further, the connection went dead. Silence filled the room, broken only by the distant hum of the city's energy cores. He knew time was short. Every second Tharion wasted mocking the gardener. He came closer to wielding the weapon. Back in the garden, Tharion paced, agitated now. The morning sun reflected off the palace walls, but even the light could not chase away the shadow of unease creeping over him. He stopped by a fountain, watching the water ripple, his reflection staring back at him. "Why do I feel uneasy?" he muttered. "It is impossible. I am the heir. I am invincible. Nothing can threaten me." But the gardener moved silently behind him, tending to a strange flower with petals the size of Tharion's hand. The air around him seemed to shimmer slightly. A faint glow emanated from the soil, barely noticeable but enough to make Tharion's skin crawl. "Are you hiding something?" Tharion asked suddenly, his voice sharper than before. The gardener did not look up. "Not hiding. Waiting. Patience is a weapon, too, you know." Tharion's hands clenched. He wanted to shout, to strike, to prove his power, but a strange feeling held him back. He could not explain it. An instinct, an unease that whispered danger. And then, from the corner of his eye, he saw a movement. A shadow flickered. Faster than any normal being could move. Tharion spun around, but the gardener remained calm, still tending to his flowers as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, far from Veyloria, in the human colonies orbiting a distant star, alarms blared. Communication stations buzzed with warnings and urgent messages. Commander Aaron's report had already triggered emergency protocols. Scientists and strategists gathered, analyzing the intercepted data. "This is worse than we feared," one scientist said. "The weapon is not only powerful, it is intelligent. It can target the weakest points, adapt to defenses, and strike without warning." "And Tharion?" another asked. A senior officer shook his head. "He's reckless. He doesn't understand what he wields. That's why the gardener is our only hope. He is different. He has faced God before. He knows how to fight forces far beyond our comprehension." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The gardener was not merely a human or servant. He was a being of immense power, one who could change the course of history. Back at the palace, Tharion's mockery grew harsher. He plucked more flowers, tossed them to the ground, and laughed at the gardener's apparent weakness. But the gardener's calm did not waver. Finally he spoke, his voice clear and commanding. "You see me as weak because you do not see the world as it is. You are arrogant, blind to your own fate. One day you will understand." Tharion scoffed. "I fear nothing. I am the heir. I control everything." The gardener straightened, his eyes gleaming with something more than human. "Control is an illusion. Power without wisdom is destruction. You will learn this, but it may be too late." For the first time, Tharion felt a flicker of fear, not the fear of losing a battle, but the fear of facing something he could not comprehend. He shook it off, telling himself he was imagining things. But deep inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. As the sun climbed higher, the gardener continued his work. His movements were simple, deliberate, almost meditative. But beneath that simplicity lay a force that even Tharion could not measure. He was patient, waiting, observing, and preparing. And somewhere in the shadows of the palace, plans were already forming. Plans that would soon change everything. The desperate call had been made. The Godslayer was stirring, and the fate of entire worlds hung in the balance. The morning light faded, giving way to the deep violet shades of Veyloria's afternoon sky. The palace gardens were quiet now, except for the gardener, who moved with a calm precision that seemed to make even the light pause. Every step he took left a subtle ripple in the air, almost invisible, but enough to make the petals of the exotic flowers tremble slightly. Tharion was still fuming, pacing through the garden with impatience. His advisors whispered in his ear, trying to calm him, but nothing worked. The heir's ego had been pricked, and he could not forget the gardener's cryptic words. "One day, you will understand. I am the heir." Tharion shouted suddenly, slamming his hand on a marble railing. "No one mocks me. No one. I will show them all." He turned sharply and stormed into the grand hall. Inside, the palace was a labyrinth of mirrored walls and floating platforms. Courtiers and servants bowed quickly as he passed, afraid of the wrath of the heir. But even in this opulent place, a sense of tension lingered. Far above the palace, the sky was filled with strange flashes. Cosmic energy, bright and wild, arced across the atmosphere. The gardener's calm eyes followed the pattern, though he did not flinch. Every flicker seemed to acknowledge him, as if the universe itself recognized his presence. That evening, a grand announcement shook the city. Tharion's voice boomed across the palace loudspeakers. Today, I will demonstrate my strength to all of Veyloria. The tournament begins at dusk. Any who dare challenge me shall witness the power of the heir. Excitement buzzed across the city. Nobles and spectators rushed to secure the best vantage points. Holographic screens across distant colonies displayed the announcement in vivid colors. Humans who had intercepted the signal shivered, knowing the stakes. The gardener watched quietly from the palace gates. He had no intention of seeking fame, yet the pull of destiny was undeniable. He had prepared for this moment for centuries, long before the heir ever drew his first breath. Today he would act, but subtly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the tournament grounds were alive with sound. Cheering, laughter, and the occasional gasp of awe. Colossal statues of Veyloria's gods loomed over the arena, carved from the rarest crystal, glowing faintly under the twilight. The platform itself was suspended in midair, a perfect circle of polished metal, reflecting the last light of the day. Tharion stepped onto the arena first. His robes flowed behind him like liquid fire, his eyes gleaming with confidence. Every move, every gesture, screamed power and control. Spectators leaned forward, murmuring admiration. Then the gardener stepped into view. At first, few noticed him. He moved with unassuming steps, silent yet deliberate. His clothes were simple, almost humble, in sharp contrast to Tharion's splendor. The crowd laughed, whispering insults. The heir faces a gardener? Is this a joke? Tharion smirked, raising his hand in mock salute. Welcome, fool. Prepare to be humiliated. The gardener stopped in the center of the arena. He did not bow, did not speak, but the air around him began to shift subtly. Small petals floated around his feet, swirling without any visible wind. Spectators gasped. It was as if the very garden had followed him here. The first challenge began. Tharion summoned a weapon of energy, a shimmering blade that pulsed with destructive force. He moved with elegance and strength, attacking invisible targets in a display of raw skill. The gardener remained still, and then, slowly he raised his hand. A ripple of energy flowed from him, invisible but undeniable. Tharion swung his blade toward him, confident and mocking. But the weapon slowed midair, almost as if the air itself resisted him. What? Tharion hissed, his arrogance cracking. The gardener moved only a step, yet the distance seemed to stretch, bending light around him. His calm face betrayed no fear. Every flick of his wrist caused subtle disturbances. Energy arcs danced along the edges of the arena, and Tharion's strikes missed with impossible precision. Spectators murmured, How is this possible? Then the unexpected happened. Tharion's allies, a group of elite warriors, joined the battle, striking in unison. But the gardener's presence seemed to slow them too. Each attack, each energy blast, seemed delayed, bending slightly off course. One warrior swung a massive hammer plasma, and it froze midair for a split second before crashing harmlessly into the arena floor. The crowd was stunned. Whispers turned to shouts. The gardener had no weapon, no armor, and yet he controlled the flow of the battle. Tharion's face grew red with anger. Show me who you are. Reveal your true power. The gardener smiled faintly, almost regretfully. Then, in a single motion, he struck the ground with his foot. The arena trembled. Energy ripples spread outward, knocking Tharion and his allies off balance. Dust petals and sparks swirled around him. Even the giant statues above seemed to shiver, as if acknowledging the presence of something far older and stronger than the air. Tharion staggered, anger and fear warring in his mind. Impossible this cannot be. The gardener's voice echoed, calm but commanding. You judge me by appearances. You mock me as weak. Yet here I stand, the one who can challenge even gods. Tharion swung wildly, desperation in his movements. But the gardener moved like water, avoiding each attack effortlessly. Each step, each movement was precise, deliberate, and strangely beautiful. The crowd could not take their eyes off him. Meanwhile, high above the arena, humans watching from their colonies held their breath. Commander Aaron's earlier warnings echoed in their minds. He is the Godslayer. Only he can stop Tharion. In the arena, Tharion realized he was no longer in control. His attacks, once so precise and powerful, now seemed clumsy against a force he could not predict. Panic crept into his mind. For the first time in his life, he faced uncertainty, and uncertainty was deadly for someone like him. The gardener did not attack recklessly. Every motion was calculated, every action designed to test, not destroy. He moved in silence, yet the energy around him hummed like a living entity. The audience watched, unable to look away, caught between fear, awe, and curiosity. Then, with a simple motion, the gardener extended his hand. A vortex of energy formed above the arena, spiraling in impossible patterns. Light bent, shadows danced, and even the stars above seemed to respond. Tharion was thrown backward, barely managing to keep his balance. "Who, what are you?" he gasped, sweat dripping from his brow. The gardener's voice was calm, almost sad. "I am the one you never saw. I am the strength you cannot measure, and I am here to stop you before your arrogance destroys everything." The arena fell silent. Tharion's allies looked at him, shocked and confused. Spectators whispered in awe, the first signs of fear appearing in their faces. Even the palace's guards were unsure whether to intervene or flee. The gardener moved again, but slowly this time, giving Tharion a chance. "You can still stop this," he said softly. "Arrogance blinds you, Heir. You can choose to learn or face ruin." Tharion clenched his fists. His pride would not allow him to step down. He lunged forward with energy flares surrounding him, ready to strike with everything he had. But the gardener did not move to meet him directly. Instead, he let Tharion's attack pass, subtly redirecting the energy around the arena. It struck nothing but empty space, leaving Tharion gasping, exhausted and humiliated. For the first time, he understood fear. Not the fear of losing a battle, but the fear of facing a being whose power he could not comprehend, whose patience, skill, and strength were beyond his reckoning. As the night fell, the arena lights cast long shadows. The gardener stood in the center, calm and composed, while Tharion collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily, his mind racing. The spectators were silent. Some cheered for the gardener, some trembled at his power, and some simply stared in disbelief. The story of the humble gardener who could rival the heir had begun, and it would be told for generations. The gardener looked at Tharion one last time. "This is only the beginning. Understand your place. Heir, your arrogance will cost you more than pride. Remember this moment." Then he turned and walked away, his calm steps leaving ripples in the air. Far below, Commander Aaron whispered into the communicator. "He's ready. The Godslayer is ready." And somewhere in the shadows of Veyloria, forces that even the heir could not imagine began to stir. The moon rose over Veyloria, pale and ghostly, casting silver light across the palace and gardens. The city below slept, unaware that destiny was unraveling above. On the floating arena, the air still hummed with residual energy from the earlier battle. The crowd, though tired, remained rooted in place, eyes wide and breasts shallow, witnessing a force beyond imagination. Tharion lay on the ground, chest heaving, pride shattered. Every muscle screamed from exhaustion, and yet an ember of arrogance still burned in his eyes. He would not bow, not yet. He raised his head, and his gaze fell upon the gardener, who stood serene in the center, as if the night itself bent around him. You are not human," Tharion growled, struggling to his feet. "What are you?" The gardener tilted his head slightly, dark eyes gleaming. "Human, perhaps, but I am more than you can imagine. I am the Godslayer." The word struck the arena like thunder. Whispers rippled through spectators, some in fear, some in awe. The humans watching from the colonies tightened their grips on their seats. Commander Aaron's earlier warnings echoed in their minds. He is the Godslayer. Only he can stop Tharion. Tharion's allies, elite warriors trained for years, clenched their fists. They had never felt such power before, not in simulations, not in legends. And they would soon understand why it was called the God Slayer. Tharion recovered, summoning energy from deep within him. The weapon he had gained, an artifact of unimaginable destruction, began to glow with pulsing light. It hovered before him, crackling, eager to obey. He raised it high, shouting to the arena, "I am invincible. None can defeat me, not even a gardener." But the gardener did not move forward. He simply raised his hand, calm and deliberate. Around him, the air shimmered. Tiny arcs of energy swirled, twisting like living threads. Light bent, shadows twisted, and the platform beneath them groaned as if it sensed the impending storm. Tharion lunged first. A blast of energy shot from his weapon, aimed straight at the gardener's heart. The crowd gasped, certain the end had come. But the gardener did not dodge. Instead, he extended both hands, palms open. The energy met an invisible barrier, a shimmering dome that rippled like water. Tharion's attack slammed into it with the force of a small comet, sending shockwaves that rattled the arena. Dust and petals scattered, and even the floating statue seemed to vibrate from the impact. The gardener remained calm, almost indifferent. "Power without control is nothing," he said softly. "You wield destruction, but not wisdom." Tharion staggered backward, stunned, his face twisted in disbelief. "Impossible, how?" The gardener stepped forward, and with each step, the arena seemed to obey him. The energy from his hands coiled into serpentine patterns, striking the floating statues. They cracked, but did not fall. The force seemed measured, controlled, precise. The spectators could not look away. Then, with a sudden motion, the gardener struck the ground. The platform trembled violently. Energy arcs exploded outward in every direction, yet no one touched the gardener. Tharion was hurled across the arena like a rag doll, his weapon barely clinging to life as sparks danced along its edges. For the first time, Tharion understood fear. Not the fear of defeat, but the fear of facing something beyond comprehension. The gardener's eyes glowed faintly. He moved like water, flowing around attacks, bending light and warping energy. Every move he made seemed effortless, almost casual, yet deadly precise. One moment he was on the left, the next he was behind, then above, everywhere at once, yet never chaotic. Tharion roared, fury and desperation intertwining. He summoned his allies, creating an offensive storm of energy blasts, plasma strikes, and blades of light. They attacked together, forming a deadly ring around the gardener. But he did not panic. He lifted a single hand, and the storm twisted unnaturally. Attacks collided midair, bouncing harmlessly. One ally swung a massive hammer of plasma, which froze in place before the gardener touched it with a flick of his finger. The hammer shattered, leaving the warrior on his knees, terrified and awestruck. The spectators screamed in shock, and the humans watching from afar clenched their fists. This was no ordinary fight. This was the battle of a god slayer against an arrogant heir armed with ultimate destruction. The gardener moved closer to Tharion. His calm voice carried across the arena. "I warned you. Arrogance blinds you. You mocked me, yet you face the consequences now." Tharion's weapon glowed brighter, the air around it boiling with power. "I will end you," he shouted. Energy surged from his body, forming a massive spear of light, pointed directly at the gardener's chest. The ground cracked beneath him, floating rocks spinning in a vortex of raw force. The gardener's gaze was unwavering. He simply raised both hands. Energy from the environment bent toward him, merging with his own. The air shimmered like liquid metal, and the spear stopped, hovering inches from his chest, frozen in defiance. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he moved a finger. The spear's tip curved harmlessly, spinning back toward Tharion, who barely managed to leap away. Shock and horror filled the heir's face. The arena shook again as the gardener struck the ground. Energy waves exploded outward, shattering parts of the floating platform. Tharion struggled to regain balance, realizing with growing dread that the gardener controlled not just the battlefield, but the very laws of motion around him. The spectators were paralyzed with awe. The gardener moved with elegance and precision, each step bending the world slightly. Tharion's allies tried to regroup, but their attacks became increasingly erratic, redirected by invisible forces. The gardener spoke, calm and commanding. You sought to mock me, Heir. You sought to prove your superiority. And yet, you are powerless before true strength. This is a way of the universe. Balance is not given. It is earned. Tharion's face twisted in rage. I will not fall. I am the heir of Veyloria. Nothing can stop me. The gardener smiled faintly, almost sadly. You overestimate yourself. And yet, you may survive if you learn. With a sudden surge, the gardener's full power revealed itself. A vortex of pure energy spiraled around him, bending light and shadow. The stars above seemed to shimmer in response. The arena's edges blurred, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with the force of his presence. Tharion lunged one last time, a desperate strike, but the gardener was already moving elsewhere, fluid and untouchable. With a single strike, the gardener redirected the air's energy back toward him. It hit Tharion's weapon, destabilizing it, and sent him crashing into the arena's edge. Dust, sparks, and petals filled the air. Tharion lay on the ground, humiliated, exhausted, and trembling. He had faced many battles, but never this. Never against someone whose calm could command the universe itself. The gardener approached him, each step measured. Remember this, Tharion. Power is meaningless without wisdom. You mocked the gardener, and nearly destroyed yourself in the process. The crowd was silent. The heir's allies were shaken, the spectators amazed, and humans in the colonies tense. Commander Aaron whispered into his communicator, barely audible, He's a godslayer, truly. There's no one like him. Tharion struggled to rise, tears of frustration welling in his eyes. The heir had never felt so powerless, never understood what it meant to face someone who transcended arrogance and force. The gardener's voice echoed across the arena, calm, final, and resonant. This is not the end, Heir. But let this night be a lesson. Your arrogance will be your undoing. And remember, true power is quiet, patient, and precise. One day, you will understand. He turned and walked away, leaving ripples of energy in his wake. The arena quivered one last time, and then stillness fell. Spectators whispered among themselves. Stories were spread far and wide. Of the humble gardener, who could challenge the heir, the god-slayer who moved like water and struck like a storm. Above the floating arena, the moonlight glimmered on his face, revealing the calm, unreadable expression of someone who had fought God before, and would do so again. Far below, the human colonies sighed in relief, knowing that the god-slayer had awakened. Yet even in that relief, a shadow lingered. The universe had not yet finished testing them all. The first light of dawn crept over the towering spires of Veyloria, painting the crystal city in shades of gold and violet. The aftermath of the previous night's battle was evident everywhere. The floating arena had cracks along its edges, fragments of crystal shimmered in the gardens, and the air still vibrated faintly with residual energy. Spectators, courtiers, and even the elite guards moved cautiously, sensing that something extraordinary had just occurred. In the center of the arena stood the gardener, calm, serene. Every flower, every petal around him seemed to glow brighter, as if acknowledging his victory. The city had witnessed a display of power beyond imagination, yet the gardener did not raise his arms in triumph. He simply stood, letting the silence and awe speak for itself. Tharion lay slumped against the edge of the platform, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Humiliation weighed on him like a stone. For centuries, the heirs of Veyloria had ruled with pride and unchallenged might. Never before had anyone, let alone a gardener, dared defy him so completely. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and support us. It really helps us grow and bring more videos like this. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.